We live. Hello, everybody. Hello. Good day to you all. Happy Thursday. Week's almost done. Blessed be. It's been a cold one here in Alberta. We finally have winter. For 1 week. And then back to warmth. Please. Okie dokie. So, I think everything is working pretty good. I have been trying out a couple streams. I've streamed, I think, twice, 2 or 3 times before this one. And I figured this time around, I wanted to do like more of a like React stream. So I still have some like topics and stuff to talk about. But I'm mostly going to be like reacting to content, I guess, specifically. So I got a couple videos prepared here, and then I'll like talk about those things. I should have all of my topics on Bear Lake camping trip. When we can again. True. Yeah, I had to miss, was it last year? I think, yeah, last year, did we have COVID stuff going on and it was locked down? I'm pretty sure. Unfortunately. Interesting. Oh, I think I need to open this up. Okay, there we go. This thing should hopefully actually read the chat to me. Would be great so I don't miss people's messages like last time. Okay, cool. Yeah, so I'm going to have some videos to react to for topics. I'm not sure if it's showing the topics in Facebook. I don't think it is. I'll probably have to write like little descriptions next time. But anyways, so the topics I want to cover today, in case it's not in the description, I have like 2 main topics, which are the pipeline. I talked about that a little bit in one of my last segments, and also Grimshaw again. So pretty much like kind of revisiting 2 of these topics as they've like unfolded a little bit more. It's been like I think 2 weeks since I've gone live last, so but yeah, there's been a little bit more that's kind of come out, and I have a little more to say. So we're gonna cover those things, and then I have a couple other like little things that I'm gonna start with, just like some random things that are kind of newsworthy or just important to me that I think would be cool to talk about. So so yeah, I'll start off with that. The first thing I wanted to start off with is something on Facebook specifically. So I'm positive that I'm not the only one that's seen these videos when I'm surfing on Facebook or like YouTube or whatever. But how many of you guys have been like just scrolling through some kind of social media, and then you've seen a video of like and it'll have like a description or whatever being like, oh no, like dog or cat kind of thing is stuck kind of thing, and or like in dangerous situation and I'm gonna help it out kind of thing, right? Like I'm pretty sure most of you guys have probably seen videos like that, right, on like Facebook and stuff. And it seems like, you know, to like on the surface level it seems like intriguing. You're like, oh cool, this person sees this animal that's in distress and they're gonna help it out. There's been videos that I know I've seen that have had like like a cat or whatever, or a dog, where there's like a snake like near it, and it's kind of showing that the cat is like in a dangerous situation with the snake or whatever. Or a lot of them are just like the animal's like trapped in like a really like dangerous environmental situation. So essentially they're just in harm's way kind of thing. Maybe they're like in, I don't know, in like a well or something like that, just something. And yeah, so on the surface, it seems like this video is going to be like this person helping the animal out, right? In reality, unfortunately, I am positive that most of these videos are actually staged. Like, so what I mean by that is that, like, whoever's filming it, they got these animals, probably from like a rescue or something, somewhere cheap, I would assume, and they put these animals in harm's way. They specifically take the animals and put them into a dangerous situation so that they can film themselves helping the animal and like look like the hero, you know? It's fucking disgusting. Like, absolutely disgusting. And the reason why I bring this up is because I was on Facebook probably a couple weeks ago, and I was scrolling through, and I got an ad for a page, like, so you know how like every about 3 posts on Facebook that you see when you go through your timeline. I should be able to probably just show you real quick here. Oh. So about every 3 posts that you see on Facebook should be an ad. I believe that's how it works, or there's some kind of metric to it. So if we go through here, oh, there's an ad right away. Ad, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, ad. Okay, so maybe every 4 roughly. 1, 2, 3, 4, ad. It's very, very common. And it's not always ads from companies. A lot of times it's ads from within like Facebook's content creators. So if I have like a page, like my page Novus, I could go and pay to boost like a particular video or picture or post or whatever kind of thing, and then it'll be advertised to whoever my audience that I select to be advertised to, essentially. So what I'm getting at is I was scrolling through Facebook and I see an ad from a page that I definitely don't follow called Cute Cats. And I'm like, okay. And the title of it is something along the lines of, I tried to find the video, unfortunately I couldn't. The title is something along the lines of like cat is in dangerous situation or something like that, like cat is stuck. And what it was there was a cat, like a little kitten, like stuck in a, sorry, also, to be fair, I should probably do like a trigger warning thing for people who don't want to talk about like animal abuse at all. You probably like want to like chill for this portion. But anyways, so the cat was in a glass jar, I believe, just like and it was like a hollow glass jar, so it was almost like a tube of glass, and its head was sticking out one end and its tail was sticking out the other end, and it was completely stuck in this thing, and it was squirming and just like completely in distress. And the whole video was just them like pulling the cat out of it, essentially, right? And I pretty much immediately recognized that this is definitely abuse, like 200% this is abuse. Like very surface level you might think, oh, this person's helping them out, but you know, they're like walking out in like the middle of some like fucking like wasteland, like some fucking like desert or whatever the fuck in this video, and or some like I don't know, like tree, like bushy area, like not civilized. And they just happen to be filming and happen to come across this cat, and they stand there for a while, and they just give you all these angles of the cat trapped and stuff like that, like it's like a fucking film project. Like, instead of like leaping into action and stuff and putting, you know, like it's so fucking obviously staged. And so my initial response was pretty much like, yeah, I should probably report this to Facebook because this is fucking disgusting. Like, why would they have this? And especially the fact that it's being advertised, right? To me, I did not follow that page. No fucking way did I follow that page. But it's still being advertised to me. So I was like, okay, so I'll just report this to Facebook. And that would probably be the end of it, and I probably wouldn't be talking about this right now if that was the case. But unfortunately, there's more. So when you report things on Facebook, they have a system where they go through what you've reported or whatever, and they decide. It's kind of like a review situation, and they decide whether or not your report is like valid. And then if it is, they take action on it. If not, they don't do anything, and they get back to you on what they've decided. And well, here's what they decided. So this was sent to me. Thanks for your feedback, and this was January 11th. So this was probably 2-3 weeks ago. Thanks for letting us know about this. The post was reviewed, and though it doesn't go against one of our specific community standards, I would assume animal abuse is probably a community standard, by the way. You did the right thing by letting us know about it. So this is just like some posturing, some really vague posturing, because they're not going to do fucking jack shit about it. You did the right thing by letting us know about something that we don't agree with. Cool. We understand that it may still be offensive or distasteful to you. Probably offensive and distasteful to fucking anyone who cares about animals. So we want to help you to see less things like it in the future. Okay, cool. So instead of taking down this post of animal abuse, we're just going to try and help you so that you don't see the stuff that we're hosting on our website in the future. Fucking cringe. From the list above, you can block cute cats directly, or you may be able to unfriend or unfollow them. We also recommend visiting the help center to learn about how to control what you see in your newsfeed. If you find that a person, group, or page consistently posts things you don't want to see, you may limit how often you see those posts or remove them from your Facebook experience. Cool, so this is all pretty much like, hey, don't like it? Well, too fucking bad. You can block them if you don't like seeing it. I don't think that there's any place on any social network for animal abuse, right? This would be something that we would put right up there with child pornography. It's abuse of a living creature, right? Like without that creature's consent. That's kind of like the whole point. This is nothing. We know these options may not apply to every situation, so please let us know if you see something else you think we should review. So the only thing is that I don't know if this is a robot that reviewed this video, or if this was a actual human being. If it was a robot, it's possible that their algorithm just, it's probably going to be searching for like swears and profanity, and then it's probably going to have some sort of like ability to detect things like child pornography to a degree and get rid of it. I'm sure that if it's a robot detecting some video of a cat in a jar, it's probably not going to flag that immediately, right? Because it doesn't necessarily seem abusive to the robot. If this was a human that reviewed it, however, then this is completely unacceptable. You know what? Either way, it's probably to some degree unacceptable, right? Yeah. So I don't know. Really, really fucking frustrating. I don't really think that there's much more to say about this, unfortunately. It's really just very straightforward, wrong, and bad. And I just wanted to bring attention to Facebook's just like absolute fucking inability to deal with this in an appropriate manner. So yeah, and especially for anyone that's watching, if you guys have ever seen those videos, definitely like the best thing we can do is probably report these things in mass when you see videos like this. We don't want like any kind of social media to be hosting these things. They definitely, right, like it's the best way for us to like be effective. If I'm the only one reporting these videos, then it's probably going to, slip by if this is a computer that's going through this, right? But if they get mass reported, it's much more possible that a human might review it. Yeah, so that is that. The next thing, so on to the next topic. It's probably going to be also, by the way, it's probably going to be like a pretty quick stream today. I'm just kind of blazing through some topics of things I wanted to talk about. And then I got to get on the road, and I'm going up to Peace River to help my friend move. So I want to kind of travel while it's still daytime. Would be nice. And the roads are shit too, because it's been snowing constantly here. So I'm sure it's going to be a fucking long-ass drive. But anyways, enough about me. On to the next topic. So I was sent this Facebook post from Mitch. He sent it to me. He ended up making like a post about it, and he sent it to me, or to like kind of check it out and just be like, yeah, like check out this. And I figured I would just kind of save it. I didn't want to read it yet, and reply to it live, and just like respond to it live. I thought that would be a little bit of fun. It's apparently about conservatives and liberals, and it's just like kind of like a rant post apparently. So Yeah, well, check this out, and I'm just going to reply to this live. Just for context, I am like a left-leaning person. So this is going to be from the perspective of like a left-leaning, I guess, Canadian Albertan in response to this. Okay, so if you ever wondered what side of the fence you sit on, this is a great test. If a conservative doesn't like guns, he doesn't buy one. If a liberal doesn't like guns, he wants all guns outlawed. Okay, we're starting this one off on a fun note. Right off the bat, it's extremes. It's like a law of extremes that are being presented here. I guess this would be like a dichotomy where you either are supportive of something in a positive way or you are absolutely against it. There's no middle ground. So this is just like a big straw man right off the bat. Liberals who don't want guns want all guns outlawed. I'm gonna go out on a limb here and assume that that's probably not true, and this whole post is probably just meant to rile up anyone who feels conservative and has these values and make them really fucking triggered at liberals by essentially just lying about liberals' opinions or just misconstruing them. To some degree, there might be some truth to this, right? Liberals want gun control, right? Lefties, to some degree, in the United States anyways, lefties actually don't really want gun control, but yeah, liberals tend to want gun control. That doesn't mean all guns are outlawed, right? Absolutely not. If a conservative doesn't like guns, he doesn't buy one. I don't know how often conservatives don't like guns either. I'm not sure if that's actually a thing, but okay. Okay. If a conservative is a vegetarian, he doesn't eat meat. That's usually how that works, yeah? If a liberal is a vegetarian, he wants all meat products banned for everyone. Oh boy. I see where this is going. So there's already a common theme here right off the bat where we're conflating liberalism with a restriction on individual freedoms, right? Do you see that? Do you notice how liberalism is being construed to be authoritarianism here? Which is really funny because the concept of liberalism is literally in its purest and I guess like its older forms, like classical liberalism is more based on individual freedoms, right? Libertarianism, right? This is like a common theme, right? So that actually kind of goes right against the concept of liberalism. So right off the bat here, we're having a fun time. If a conservative is a vegetarian, he doesn't eat meat. If a liberal is a vegetarian, they also don't eat meat. And they don't want all meat products banned for everyone. Not at all. There's definitely some fucking cringe vegetarians, or I guess it would be like, I think they might be talking about like that cliche like vegan. I'm sure that there's some out there, but they're not a representative of the entire population. Like, you have to understand that, right? This whole post is probably just going to be strawmanning liberals into some like fucking extremist position. He wants all meat products banned for everyone. There's a lot to dive into with like why we want to move away from the way that we produce meat in the current state, but it has nothing to do with like banning all meat products for everybody. Like, we don't want to ban things that are like necessary to some degree or so integrated into our current society that they're very necessary. What we want to do is we want to move away from those things in a transitional period. So what I mean by that is Beyond Meat would be a really, really great example right off the bat. So Beyond Meat is probably like a pretty good alternative to meat in that it gives you some degree of all of the same nutritional value, right? The things that are important in meat. So protein is a huge one, right? And then on top of that, it tastes like actual meat to some degree. And when you think about it, though, so when I talk about Beyond Meat in this way, it's important to note that it's not going to taste like any kind of hamburger that you've had before, right? But when you think about all the places that you've eaten meat before, so let's just talk about burgers, for example, right? We've got A&W, we've got McDonald's, we've got Wendy's, we've got Burger King, and then you've got your local burger places, right? In whatever small town you're at, right? In Edmonton here, we have Woodshed Burgers. We have I don't know if apparently they're not local right to Edmonton, but Burger Priest is another good one. And then Five Guys, right? All these burger places. Now think about the taste of the meat. Do the burgers and even just the meat, does the meat taste the same at every place that you get a burger from? There's some degree of that it's clearly meat, right? But the way that it's spiced and such, it's different at every place that you eat burgers, right? Beyond Meat is not really much different from that, right? It's just a different kind of burger, right? You kind of just have to think about it in that way to understand, like, why. When you go into A&W and you get a Beyond Meat burger and it doesn't taste like the regular A&W burger, kind of just, in a way, you're kind of just having a burger that's like a different burger, you know? So, in that way, we want to transition towards removing meat by replacing it with like a viable alternative, right? The reason why we would want to move away from meat, from like a left perspective, I guess, is because producing meat requires immense amounts of energy. So we're talking the amount of water that it takes, right? Like think about like a cow, right, that you get meat from. You have to raise that cow for X amount of years. So you have to feed it for X amount of years, right? So you have to, to feed it, you have to grow whatever crops that it's going to eat, whatever crops you're going to feed it. So that's going to take some amount of water. That's going to take some amount of like land and soil, right? Some amount of time to grow that, some amount of energy, right? Even we could talk about like photosynthesis and the energy required to grow the plants. From there, you feed the animals food for its entire lifetime, right? It drinks water, X amount of water, up until the point that it gets slaughtered, right? This is from a perspective of like environmentalism, by the way, not about like animal cruelty. That's another layer, but I'm just focusing on the environmental impact. So, you put in all this energy into raising this animal, like a shit ton of energy, right? The land that this animal needs to live in, right? And then you kill it, you slaughter it. This is all energy taken by humans to prepare this product, right? You ship it off, however many miles that it moves, right? That's another thing. And gets to the consumer, and that's it. And then you eat it, and you gain your nutritional value from it, and then whatever, tastes good, tastes like meat, cool. Like, meat's good, sure. I still eat meat, by the way. But I understand like the arguments here. All of this energy that it takes to make this burger is unsustainable. That's kind of the point. It's at the level that we need it to. It's having like a massive detriment on the environment. The greenhouse gases that are required. Even like that comes from like the methane from the cows, right, too, and the cow manure and everything. That all like contributes to it. All of these things, and it's mostly like when we're talking about this, I'm not talking about. I have to be very, very clear here. You guys have to understand when I'm talking about the meat industry and I'm talking about why we want to transition away. I'm not attacking your local farmers, like their footprint in this, in the grand scheme of things, is absolutely minimalistic. I'm talking about the big factories, right? We have to be very particular when we're talking about these criticisms, and from there, essentially, the big factories that do all the mass slaughterings and stuff, right, and such, that's where our big environmental impact comes from, right? And so what we want to do is we want to move away from the way that we're producing meat for mass consumption in the current state, and move towards something that's more sustainable, something that requires less water, less time, less energy, right? And so something like Beyond Meat, we're moving in the right direction. I know that we're not like exactly where we want to be with that, but that's the exact direction we want to move in, where we have a replacement that tastes a lot like meat, where like we can move our because like it's going to be really hard to make that cultural shift, right? Like when everyone's used to eating meat, like who's not going to want to cook with hamburger and stuff anymore, right? So you have to introduce it in a way that it's familiar to people, right? So that they can transition onto this new one, right? So that we can make burgers, make meat, make like fuck. Maybe we'll even be like growing it like in a petri dish or whatever, right? One day, like just recreating the meat, right, without having to actually like harm animals in the process. And I would assume this would probably in this like theoretical example, it would probably be more environmentally sustainable, right? The energy you put into it and stuff to grow it would have to be better, otherwise it wouldn't be worth it, right? So that's kind of the point of everything, right? We want to move in that direction, and reduce our environmental impact. And this is less on the consumers. This is more on the corporations that create these products and stuff, right? That raise the animals and slaughter them. But it is important as consumers that we advocate for the things that we want, right? That we want to see. So when you see Beyond Meat, the best way to move from our current meat system forward is to support things like Beyond Meat when they come out, right? When you give those companies more money, they're able to thrive in the situation. They're able to make their assembly line a lot more efficient, right? They can invest in a lot more. They can drive the price down of their cost to produce these alternatives, and we'll get to a point essentially where Beyond Meat is cheaper than like regular beef, because it's going to be pretty easy to beat that, right? Years to raise a cow, the amount of energy and time that it takes, right? Like it's really hard to like, because there has to be a cost associated with that energy that you put into it, right? To make the cow. So it's going to be really hard to drive the price of actual meat down when you have to raise the cow, right? Like the price is going to stay at a certain level, right? Whereas alternatives like Beyond Meat, you can drive the price down because you're using, like, you're just making it out of beans and stuff, right? Or out of, yeah, I think it's beans, peas, pea protein, I believe actually was what it was. Yeah, so it's just efficiency, right? So essentially you get to a point where Beyond Meat's cheaper. Well, what happens when the alternative ends up being cheaper and fairly equivalent in quality? You're probably going to see a transition away from meat products, right? So that's kind of the point of that. It's not that we want to ban all meat products, right? And I'm not even a liberal, so I'm not even going to like defend this as if I am a liberal. That's the entire point, right? But liberals tend to agree to some extent about this. So that kind of addresses that. Little bit of a rant there, but just wanted to explain exactly what's going on with this situation and what's being presented here as a liberal opinion. If a conservative is down and out, he thinks about how to better his situation. Down and out, he thinks about how to better his situation. A liberal wonders who is going to take care of him. Okay, so this is like a really, really big, like, generalized statement. This is probably talking about how liberal policies for, like, say, homelessness and stuff tend to be, or even like drug addiction tend to be like things that are trying to help people out of these situations, right? But it tends to be that the government ends up subsidizing some portion of the help, right? And then conservatives, this is the whole pull up your bootstraps meme. That's literally what this is. When a conservative is having a rough time, they think about how to better their situation. A liberal wonders who's going to take care of him. Oh boy. No human, like, humans are social creatures. So right off the bat, we all want somebody to, like, take care of us to a degree. So, like, sure, like, pretend that you're this, like, purely individualistic, like, entity. Not true at all, right? Liberals don't just give up when, like, I don't understand what this even means. Like, this is just so, like, clearly wrong. Like, how do I even address how wrong this is? I don't even know, like, how to address this point. It's just like a big straw man. Like, who's gonna take care of me? It's literally just like this is the stern dad who's going to his job and something happens and he buckles down and he takes on some more hours at the fucking factory or whatever because his job's on the line and blah blah blah, and then his son is like, oh, I'm just working at McDonald's and I don't have enough money to pay for for my my car, my fancy car insurance, and I need some daddy help. Like, it's fucking like, this isn't an accurate depiction at all about like how people fucking work. Specifically, like, conservatives and liberals. There's no actual differences between these two things in that respect at all. If a conservative doesn't like a talk show host, oh no, it's cancel culture. Oh, here we go. If a conservative doesn't like a talk show host, he switches channels. Liberals demand that those they don't like be shut down. Beautiful. You find great examples of cancel culture. Cancel culture, I don't even give a fuck about doesn't fucking matter. But you find great examples of cancel culture on both sides of the spectrum. This is like right off the bat, Ryan Jesperson in he's an Edmonton political commentator to some degree. He used to do like a talk show, I think, on the radio. He made some like not very great. I wouldn't defend his comments at all, but he made some comments that were like I guess seen as like racial comments, racialized comments. I'm not sure. They probably were. I don't remember the exact specifics, but essentially the main point of me bringing him up is that I know he's left-leaning, and he got his platform removed from him. He was pretty much immediately booted from the talk show. They just like fucking canceled it. He'd been on that for years too at this point in time, right? Years, maybe decades. Fuck, I don't know. He'd been on that for a long time, right? Immediately booted. So that's a lie. Like, for sure, left-leaning like ideology tends to be more like favorable in social media and in like for companies' opinions. But that's just because it's more like profitable for them, right? Liberals demand that those they don't like be shut down. This is really an important distinction to make here too, is that like liberals don't just see something that they disagree with and say, I disagree with that, I want that to, or like left-leaning people, I disagree with that and I don't want that person to be able to talk, whatever. What happens is usually liberals and left-leaning people see somebody doing something pretty fucking like vile, right? So like, let's say racism, public racism, or being a transphobe, or being a xenophobe, right? Or being like, anti-Semitic, right? Just literally having some hateful fucking disgusting ideology and using their platform to spew it, right? And, or even just like, I guess this would be talking about platforms specifically. And they decide, hey, guess what? You're not going to get away with that. Like, it's consequences to actions, right? Do you think that your freedom of speech protects your ability to go out and degrade people online? I don't think so, right? That's not the point. Like, that's not, like, freedom of speech doesn't give you the ability to degrade protected classes. That's kind of the whole caveat there, right? There's protected classes in our like legal system. You can't go out and say racially charged things, right? So it's not liberals demanding that people that disagree with them are shut down. It's liberals and left-leaning people seeing people being absolute fucking cancer online, like, and telling them, nope, like, you're not allowed to spew those hateful things, right? We have no place in our society for it, right? I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Does anyone actually disagree with that? I fucking highly doubt it. Can you actually disagree with the thought of somebody, if somebody was online using their platform to spread racist ideologies and transphobic ideologies and anti-LGBTQ, right? Like, all these things. Would you be opposed to that? To them having their platform taken away? I don't know, that seems like punishment fits the crime. If a conservative is a non-believer, he doesn't go to church. A liberal non-believer wants any mention of God and Jesus silenced. Oh no. Oh no. So, religion. I don't want to dive too deep into the religion aspect, but do you really think that liberals want any mention of God and Jesus to be silenced? I don't think that this is true at all. There's a lot of liberals that are religious. Conservatism tends to be the party that religious people, especially like Christians and Catholics, tend to like pool around, because it tends to have a lot of like shared ideologies, right? It's almost like the principles of their religion are like a fundamental part of conservatism, right? And where they get a lot of their policies from. Doesn't mean that liberals aren't religious at all, right? For sure. Like this is like a really weird, like, if you're conservative, you're what is it? If you're a non-believer and you're conservative, you don't go to church. A liberal non-believer. Oh, I guess it's talking about non-believers only specifically. So I should probably be fair to that. So a liberal non-believer wants any mention of God and Jesus to be silenced. Okay, I misread that a little bit. So I don't think, that's still obviously not accurate, right? Like, it's very common for like more left-leaning people to be like not religious, atheist, agnostic. It doesn't like mean that we don't want religion to be mentioned anywhere, right? Generally what it tends to be is just that when you use your religion to push a narrative that ends, it's kind of similar to like the last thing we were talking about here, where you're using your religion to push like racist things, right? Oh, I don't want this race of people here because they're the devil or whatever. And like anti-LGBTQ things, right? Oh, well, you shouldn't be able to marry if you're gay, right? Like all these like fucking cringe ass takes. That's the problem that we generally have, right? You could look into a couple more like things like economically, like churches should probably pay taxes and stuff, right? There's a couple other things, but that has nothing to do with wanting no mention of any God or Jesus. This is just flat out false. If a conservative decides he needs healthcare, he goes about shopping for it or may choose a job that provides it. Oh, so this is an American take for sure, for sure. A liberal demands that the rest of us pay for his. Healthcare, and especially, I don't even like really need to argue about this too much in Canada, right? Because like even conservatives value our healthcare. It's been like pretty much ingrained into us, like culturally. Like essentially, it's just so ingrained into our like norms and stuff that we pretty much like all feel like a fundamental right to healthcare in Canada because we've had it for so long. I don't really need to like fight too much about this, but it's clearly wrong. If a conservative decides he needs healthcare, so this is like pretty much like if a rich person, we can replace the word conservative here with if a rich person decides he needs healthcare, he goes about shopping for it because he can afford it, right? Like when in the United States, for how expensive it is, right? It doesn't. If you have the money, it doesn't matter. You can, you can shop for it. Or may choose a job that provides it. Not everybody has that luxury to have a job that provides like benefits. Working in grocery, for example, it's quite hard. Like any kind of like retail position and any kind of like non-management position, it's very, very difficult to get any kind of like health benefits, even in Canada. And generally what that means is in Canada, that means dental, that means like your prescription drugs, and that means like eye care. So like I actually recently got my glasses because of my like benefits that I have through my work, which is sweet, really great. Not exactly the best model for it, but at the end of the day, this is kind of like a free market solution to things, which ends up harming poor people almost every time, right? So we can just replace these words here. Yeah, a rich person decides they need healthcare. They can go about and decides they need healthcare. Every fucking human needs healthcare.
Grimacing face.
True. Grimacing face. I like how the chat reader thing like reads out what the smiley is. Yep. Thank you, Mitch, for this post. It's very entertaining, to say the least. Yeah, if a conservative, or if a rich person, I guess I reword that, decides they need healthcare, people don't decide that they need healthcare. Things happen to them and they just need it. They don't decide it, right? You don't wake up with a broken arm and then go like, I think I need healthcare. You just need healthcare. Like things happen and you need it, right? Humans, we're born, we live, our bodies fucking decay as like after like the age of like 27 or whatever the fuck it is. Body starts slowly decaying until we die, right? At like age whatever it is. Average age, I believe in Canada is about like 81 or something like that. Your body slowly just quits, right? Parts of it stops working. That's the point of healthcare, is that, you know, when you have something that's a problem with your body, with your health, you go out and you get it fixed, or you address it through the healthcare system, right? Everybody needs healthcare. It doesn't fucking matter. Everybody, even young people who are generally more relatively healthy, right? There's sections of healthcare that are applicable to every age group. So saying decides he needs healthcare. Well, everybody needs it. This is kind of where you like form the argument that everybody should have healthcare because everybody needs healthcare at some point in time, right? For sure. You can make like a pretty good argument that from there that everybody should pay their fair share. If everyone pays together, then everyone can pay their fair share together, and then everyone can have access to it whenever they need it, and it's not dependent on if you are rich enough to afford healthcare or not. Essentially, you don't just die because you can't afford to pay for some kind of like necessary surgery or whatever, or any kind of like life altering thing. So from there, we can go into like there's also a portion of healthcare. Important to note that like when you it's called what's it called blah 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 blah, it's called return on investment. It's a pretty common term that we would use in like business, right? When you're investing in anything, you want a positive return on investment, and in healthcare the return on investment is almost always positive. There's lots of studies to back this up. I don't remember the exact number, but for like just a general idea, essentially how it works is, in a publicly funded healthcare system, when we're talking about return on investment, everybody contributes, right? So everyone has like X amount of dollars taken off of their paycheck. Now, for the sake of this example, let's say $1 is taken off of everybody's paycheck. The way that the return on investment in healthcare works, it is a positive. It depends on where you go and what you see. I know like in California the return on investment is like 1 to 78, but what that means essentially is, for this example, $1 is taken off everyone's paycheck in Canada, let's say, right, for healthcare. Now, the return on investment says that for every dollar that we put into healthcare, you're going to get $4 in value back. Now, where that value generally comes from is actually from treating things early when they need to be treated. In a system where everyone can access healthcare whenever they need to access healthcare, what ends up happening is that when you have, like say you have diabetes like starting to form, and you kind of notice because you're getting some dizzy spells or something here and there, right? And so like when healthcare is free, you can easily, like, it's much more reasonable to just go to the hospital when you feel unwell in any way, shape, or form, right? So you go to the hospital because you're feeling dizzy spells. Oh, you've got, I don't remember what number or what order it goes in, but let's say you've got like stage, is it stages? I forget. How does diabetes work? Let's see. Do. Okay, cool. Yeah. So there's stages in diabetes, yeah. So I don't remember how diabetes works exactly, and I'm not gonna like read up on it immediately here. But essentially, let's say they've got like let's say that stage 3 in this example is like early diabetes, like very minor, and then stage 1 is like major diabetes. Just for like the sake of understanding what I'm saying right now very easily. So you go in, you got some signs of diabetes, and they say, hey, yeah, you've got stage 1 diabetes, or stage 3 diabetes. This is just started up. All you got to do is do this, and this kind of thing. Take this, like change your diet in this way, and you can pretty much remove the diabetes because we caught it early enough, right? For like how cheap that is, right? Like you're pretty much just getting like health advice, right? In this like example, this is how public healthcare makes things cheaper, because you go in and you get the problem fixed immediately because money's no object when everybody invests in it, right? So it actually ends up being like people end up treating their issues earlier on when they start to notice symptoms and stuff, right? Instead of letting them drag on. Now, Now let's change this to another example. In the United States, they don't have healthcare. So, buddy's feeling a little bit dizzy spells and stuff here. Same guy, right? Let's say like just exact same, like just alternate reality guy, but he lives in the States instead, feeling dizzy spells and stuff. But man, going to the hospital it's gonna cost like $400 just to go to the hospital, right? I don't have $400, so I guess I'm just gonna have to just work through it. Something must just be going on, really weird, whatever. They put it off, right? And you can look at this. This is a very translatable example to any other scenario, right? We're just talking about diabetes as this scenario. So he waits years and years and years, and things get worse and worse until one day he just completely passes out, right? Just completely blacks out at work.
I guess.
Just die. True. Please. If you don't have money, just die. So he passes out.
Unnecessarily apparently faced with tears of joy.
So he passes the fuck out at work, and the ambulance has to bring him to the hospital. Well, now he's got an ambulance bill. Fuck, man, that's expensive. That's pretty expensive. And then he gets there, and oh man, you're stage 1 diabetes, dude. You gotta we gotta have you on, I don't know, is it insulin? I forget. I'm pretty sure it's insulin, right? Because that's spike in insulin. I don't remember. But you get the drugs anyways and stuff, right? You get the little machine to poke your finger and stuff like that. It's more expensive to some degree, right? Because we didn't treat it early. And now, dude can't get rid of diabetes. He has diabetes for the rest of his life, right? Because he didn't treat it early enough. This is pretty much why we want a public healthcare system. This is where you get that savings. For every dollar you invest, you get $4 in this example. I don't know if that's the exact number, but you get $4 in return on value kind of thing. Return on investment is what it's called. So this is why you would want public healthcare, because your bang for your buck is insane. Your $1 is worth $4 worth of value kind of thing, of healthcare value, right? It's a little bit of a complex topic, but that's the best way to describe it in really, really easy terms. So saying this whole statement, if a conservative decides he needs healthcare, he goes about shopping for it. It's just literally just rich person versus poor person thing. And there's actually no merit for this argument at all. It's a really just feels over reals argument of oh, well, I'm better than you. You want everyone else to just pay for your stuff. No, it just makes sense, right? You can't really deny that your system is just going to be fucking inefficient. Why would you want an inefficient system? I don't understand. Aren't conservatives the business minded people, right? Aren't they the ones who are making all these business savvy decisions, right? They're the only one, they're the people who can run the business the best, right? Well, why would you want something that's inefficient? That makes no sense, right? If it can, and then that's, I don't know. That's all I have to really say about that point there. A little bit of a tangent, but if a conservative reads this, he'll forward it to his friends, so his friends can have a good laugh. A liberal will delete it because he's offended. Oh, beautiful. Own the libs. It's great. Yeah, just a lot of feels over reals arguments to own the libs. Beautiful. I love it. Well, I forwarded it to you. Oh shit. Does that mean that because I asked Mitch to send this to me that I'm a conservative? Fuck. Got me. They got me now. It's too late. Yeah, so that's pretty much that. It's mostly just a bunch of really hard straw mans of liberal positions to extremist positions, essentially. They're just taking the small handful of extremist liberals and making them making their beliefs be a blanket statement for all liberals. And then the conservative thing seems to just be a holier than thou thing for every fucking statement. It's clear that this was to some degree meant to be comical. So maybe they were straw manning liberals just on purpose and they knew it, but regardless, it sends this really weird message to conservatives that make them end up being super triggered at liberals, which is pretty funny too. That they're so bothered by these liberal opinions that they don't even bother to try and understand the justifications for everything. They just strawman them into this extremist position. So that's pretty funny that they get so fucking worked up about that. But yeah, that was a fun time. Okay. So that's it for. I think that's it for like my little stuff. I guess I could talk about this real quick. So the House of Commons, this is Canadian stuff. The House of Commons passed a motion to designate the Proud Boys as a terrorist entity. This is, I think I talked about this a little bit before too. I might have. Fuck, I don't remember. But anyways, it's a step in the right direction. I don't think that. I think that this still needs to go through the our Senate or whatever. I think, or like our equivalent of the Senate. But it's pretty possible that this is going to pass. Like, it's highly likely. It doesn't seem like there's like enough people disagreeing with this within our party system that this will get stopped at all. So this is like, yeah, it's a move in like a very positive direction. The House of Commons has passed a motion to designate the Proud Boys as a terrorist entity. The motion passed with unanimous consent, but at this point it's not an official designation. So yeah, still need to complete that essentially. Public Safety Minister Bill Blair is still gathering evidence to possibly make it an official designation. If that happens, the Proud Boys would join groups like the Al-Qaeda, Hezbollah, and the Islamic State on Canada's national list of terrorist organizations. That's pretty fucking wild. Like, we would have our first white supremacist group of people designated as a terrorist organization. And this is pretty important too, because unless they make the very specific distinction of like domestic terrorism, this would just be in the same category as all of these other like foreign terrorist organizations, unless terrorist organization is just like a catch-all phrase that they're using. But yeah, there's not really like much else to say here, unless for some reason you didn't think the Proud Boys were a white supremacist organization, in which case obviously you're wrong. And I don't know, you have problems with that issue or with that designation, I guess. But it's very, very clear that the Proud Boys are a white supremacist organization, right? And generally white supremacy, it's not usually like a non-violent thing. Seeing if there's, I'm just skimming through to see if there's anything else of interest in this article. Yeah, not really. Essentially, this was all spurred from the Capitol riots that happened in the U.S. I don't think that this would have happened. People have been advocating for stuff like this to happen for a while. I don't think this would have happened if the Capitol riots didn't happen. And I'm curious if moving forward, if they're going to designate more than just the Proud Boys as a terrorist organization, because there is like more like right-wing extremist groups that exist within Canada that could easily fall under the same category, right? The Proud Boys is probably like one of the most like prominent ones that are known, but I forget the exact. There's quite a few other distinction or other groups, right? Yeah, that's pretty much it for that one. Now, getting into more, I guess we'll get into more of the of the deep topics here. Let's see. I'll probably start off with. I think I'll start off with the pipeline stuff. So, recently, the Keystone XL pipeline was officially canceled or scrapped by the Biden administration. There's some relevance to this in Canada, being that the Keystone XL pipeline was Alberta's way to get more of their oil to the market to some degree, or at least that's the argument that's being presented to us. So I think I've been paying attention for the last couple weeks as the discourse has kind of grown online around this, and and especially a lot of conservative politicians in Alberta and in Canada have been pushing their opinions and stuff, and pretty much their whole like bully tactic, like normal, like, you know, if they better make that pipeline or else there's going to be some repercussions. And it just, I've noticed that there's just been like a really, really dishonest conversation coming from conservatives about our pipelines and about like our oil field. And it's really interesting because growing up, I just remember hearing these topics and these points of conversation come up over and over and over again, and no one ever really seemed to like back any of these things, but no one ever seemed to really question them either. And I noticed the title of this video posted by Jason Kenney was pretty much saying exactly all of the things that I see everybody in Alberta say, and it's just really interesting because it doesn't seem like there's actually much evidence to suggest that much of any of these things that we say about our oil field are actually true when we're talking in like this like really proud way about it. So I'm gonna watch this. It's like 2-minute video, and then we can read the whole title after, and then we'll respond to it as we go, I guess. This was posted on January 23rd, so that was like about 5 days ago, something like that. So let's see. Oh, I gotta turn the volume up. Boop, boop, boop.
With that, we could help our friends become less dependent on foreign oil imports, including from hostile OPEC dictatorships, some of which are openly hostile to the United States, and none of which share Canada's commitment to high environmental standards, to global stability, and to human rights. We're being told that this decision was made over concerns about climate policy. But the U.S. State Department's exhaustive analysis that was conducted under President Obama's administration concluded that Keystone XL would actually reduce CO2 emissions, as the alternative will be to move this energy by higher emitting and less secure rail transport. The Canadian oil sands have reduced the carbon intensity of the average barrel of bitumen by about 30%.
Oh boy.
And are on track for even larger reductions. Our oil sands production, our oil sands producers rank at the top of the world in global assessments of environmental, social, and governance standards. Most of these companies have committed to net zero emissions in their operations. The Government of Canada has more ambitious emissions reduction targets than the new U.S. administration, and our provincial government here is investing billions of dollars in the development of emissions reductions technology to further make progress on this important front. In other words, Canada is part of the solution to the energy transition. But today's decision was made without giving Canada the chance to make that case.
So, yeah, it's very much more of the same. Like, a lot of this discourse that I see online is fueled by this exact same language across the board that conservatives use. So, it's a lot of really, like, vague posturing about how Canada and Alberta's, like, oil field and like our standards and stuff are the highest, or of, like, really high tier. But notice how it's never really quantified. How high exactly, right? Where exactly do we sit in this like global ranking? Why exactly? So, like, you know, it sounds like a fairly good argument. If you're like a conservative Albertan watching this, especially if you work in the oil field, when you hear an argument like this, man, why wouldn't they want the pipeline? Less emissions? Man. Jobs? We're going to make jobs by making the pipeline? Oh man. Like, all of these arguments, it's just really odd that they wouldn't want it, right? That's what you'd think. There's a reason for that, because a lot of what you're seeing here is just like really hard fucking propaganda that's not actually backed by like any evidence. So, going through the video again here, let's see.
With that, we could help our friends become less dependent on foreign oil imports, including from hostile OPEC dictatorships.
So this point is like fairly interesting in that like dependent, I don't know if we would necessarily call it dependency. We're like framing this as dependency, but you do know that like Saudi oil is cheaper than Canadian oil, right? Because the extraction process is it ends up being like it costs less, right, to extract their oil. So the reason why they're so dependent on that oil is literally just the free market, by the way. If you own a company and you're selling any kind of oil and gas products, or you need oil and gas products to make whatever your finished product is, and you have the option between really cheap oil from Saudi Arabia or like 3 times, 4 times the price for Canadian oil, like which one are you going to buy? This is just the free market deciding like where they want to buy their stuff from, right? Conservatives love the free market, my dude. That's like their fucking shit. So like it's not about that they don't have the ability, like they're not dependent on Saudi oil. There's just, it's a free market. They're buying some Saudi oil, they're buying some Canadian oil. The US actually produces the most oil. I believe in the world. It's the US is the leader in oil production, producing 19.47 million barrels per day. And it's held that spot for 6 years. So like the US has absolutely like no problem in supplying themselves. That's actually why they've kind of moved away a little bit from Albertan oil. As of like the more like modern times, right? That's why there's a little bit less demand for us, because the U.S. ramped up more production to meet their own demands and stuff, right? I would say by no means necessary is the U.S. dependent on Saudi oil. It's literally just the free market, so that's just a lie straight off the bat.
Some of which are openly hostile to the United States, and none of which share Canada's commitment to high environmental standards, to global stability, and to human rights.
So there's like some truth in these points. I'm not sure how much of it Jason Kenney actually gives a fuck about. I fucking highly doubt that he gives a fuck about if where we're buying our oil from has any kind of like human rights that like are equivalent to our standards of human rights. If that was the case, then like pretty much all the products that we sell, like he would not, like Walmart, who sources like a lot of their products from like anyone who sources their products from China would immediately just be off the fucking table, right, as an option, because all of the fucking products that we source from China, like let's even talk about like Apple iPhones, right? Let's talk about Samsung phones, right? All of the technology that we have, is super fucking cheap. Do you know why it's super fucking cheap? And it might not seem cheap, but it is actually cheap in the grand scheme of things. It's cheap because we pay workers in China. We outsource our jobs to China for fucking pennies. These people are practically slave labor. Like that's essentially what we're supporting when we support all these things. But this is just built into the system, right? This is how the entire system operates. We've moved so many jobs down to China for especially like the tech industry, and we're used to the luxury of those things. We're not gonna want to pay like another $2,000-$3,000 for like a phone. No fucking way.
Did you cover the GameStop stuff? Surprised face.
No, I didn't cover the GameStop stuff, but I might read through it before the end of my stream. I posted, I might read through just like a post I found on Facebook about it that describes it really well. It's pretty fucking wild though. So yeah, like when you come out and you say that we only want to buy oil, or we want to incentivize buying oil from places that have human rights, that like align with Canada's values for human rights, well, why the fuck aren't we across the board? Like I agree with that statement. We probably should, right? I would say that like maybe Canada, so my stance on this is that probably Canada should probably supply our own oil for the most part, right? Like it might be more expensive and stuff, but it's probably the most ethical way to do it. I think this is probably true, right? But when we're talking about like human rights, and that's the reason why we don't want to buy from Saudi Arabia, why don't we take that same mentality and use it across the board for everything else, right? And we just don't. The only reason why is because Jason Kenney's posturing. He doesn't care. Like it's literally just to make himself like look like he cares, right? Oh. I gotta 1 second, guys. I just gotta pause the stream. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. And I think everything's good. Had to turn off the audio. Cool. Sorry about that. I just got a call. Had to take it. So anyways, yeah, what I was saying essentially, it doesn't really make much sense. I think that it's like generally probably a good argument, but the fact that we're not consistent across the board with that argument just screams that the only reason we're using that argument is to push a particular narrative, the narrative being the pipeline. Global stability, human rights. And commitment to high environmental standards. Notice how like that's just like a really vague statement. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later, but it's a very, very common thing that we tend to get from Albertans as a statement when we're talking about supporting the pipeline.
Concerns about climate policy. But the U.S. State Department's exhaustive analysis that was conducted under President Obama's administration concluded that Keystone XL would actually reduce CO2.
1 second. Printer's on the fritz for no reason. Okay, cool. Okay, I gotta go back a bit here.
Concluded that Keystone XL would actually reduce CO2 emissions, as the alternative will be to move this energy by higher emitting and less secure rail transport.
So, this point is like pretty interesting. What do you think the reason is that we want to make a new pipeline? The argument is probably something along the lines that we want to make a new pipeline because we want to put more of our oil to market, right? So do you think that the net CO2 emissions from us sending more oil into the market from Canada is going to be less CO2 emissions? That doesn't really make much sense, does it? And that's something that we're not considering here. When we're talking here about the less CO2 emissions, they're talking about specifically just how sending it through a pipeline would be less CO2 emissions. They're not talking about the fact that the pipeline increases capacity for selling oil, which means we can send more oil to the market, which means we are like making more oil, producing more oil, which in turn creates more carbon emissions, right? So this is a framing issue where we're just framing it to sound like it's going to have like less emissions essentially. The reality is far from that. Also, this happened during the Obama administration. This where they figured out that it would be less emissions. The Obama administration was the one who originally rejected the Keystone XL pipeline. Let's keep that in mind when we're talking about especially things like investing $1.5 billion into the Keystone XL pipeline. When we know that Joe Biden, somebody who was the vice president of the United States during the Obama administration, is going to probably be the president now. I wonder what policy he's going to enact if he was part of the original policymakers for rejecting Keystone. Anyways, it's probably true to some degree that sending oil by pipeline would be more efficient, right? But then you're making an argument that's actually, so conservatives like to peddle this argument a lot of times too, that getting rid of a pipeline would kill jobs. Did we ever consider that making a pipeline also kills jobs? You might have jobs initially, yeah, to make the pipeline. They're temporary jobs, so I don't really know how much value that is other than to like GDP, right? But temporary jobs don't really matter to workers. Like, we want full-time, consistent work in Alberta, right? We don't want to be riding waves of big job come and then wait X amount of years and then, another big job come, right? Like, that's not sustainable, right? We want like full-time jobs. The full-time jobs that you get from the pipeline when it's finished are minimalistic. And what ends up happening is that all of those people that were required to like when we use a pipeline to replace a railway system, all those people who were required to work that railway system now are out of a job, right? Or a large portion of them, because you replace them with just like maintenance crew, like a small amount of maintenance crew for a pipeline, right? So I do think that the pipeline would be probably better, right? Because it's more efficient, and I think that I would back things that are more efficient almost always. But my point is just that conservatives like to have every piece of the pie that they can. They want to talk about how we're creating jobs, but then they're not talking about how making a pipeline will actually end up reducing jobs too, right? It just, all these inconsistencies across the board with these arguments, like we're just being peddled just the right information to make us really want to back these things, right? And it makes us really confused when the rest of the world isn't behind it too. We're like, well, why don't you, it's because in Alberta, this is what we were fed our whole fucking lives, is this fucking propaganda, like super fucking hard. We're fed one really, really hard framing of a side of the story and arguments, and we just eat it up, right?
The Canadian oil sands have reduced the carbon intensity of the average barrel of bitumen by about 30%.
That doesn't mean anything. That doesn't mean fucking shit at all. Do. Let's see. Where do I have it? Oh. One barrel of oil sands produced oil releases 3 times as much greenhouse gases when compared to conventional oil, due to the amount of energy necessary to convert tar sands into synthetic crude, the usable form of oil. In fact, we rank number 47 out of 50 in a study comparative analysis for countries. For carbon footprint measured per barrel, it doesn't matter whether or not we have reduced our carbon footprint, or whatever it is here, whatever he said,
by about 30%, and
by 30% per barrel, because we're still wildly off track, right? If you reduce that by 30%, then you're still more than 2 times as much greenhouse gases still, right? It doesn't matter. We're still way more. In the grand scheme of things, you're talking about oh, well, instead of so how do I put this? If if you have a car and it's a gas car, and you have a hybrid car, right? So you have a gas car and then you have a hybrid car. And every year they make the gas car more and more efficient, right? The gas car burns off 2 gallons per mile, let's say. It's completely unrealistic, but 2 gallons per mile. And the hybrid car burns off, let's say, half a gallon per mile. Then clearly the gas car is less efficient, right? When it comes to gas specifically, when we're just talking about just the gas that you put in the car kind of thing that it uses and burns. Now, clearly the gas car is worse than the hybrid car for burning fuels and for its carbon footprint, therefore, right? However, you can't just look at the gas car and say, well, but next year, though, next year's model, we've reduced the emissions by 30%. So it only actually burns off that would be 1.3 barrels, barrels, whatever I said before, the same metric. Gallons, sorry, 1.3 gallons of oil per mile. Well, sure, it might burn off less, and that's a step in the right direction, right? But now the new hybrid car only burns off 0.3, right? It doesn't really matter, right? And this is just for one example, but either way, no matter what, even if we stuck with the original number for the hybrid car, it would still be less, right? Reducing is good for the oil, for the consumption and the emissions, but it doesn't mean anything unless you compare it to everything else, right? And that's not what we're doing here. We're just talking about in a vacuum what we've done to the carbon emissions.
are on track for even larger reductions. Our oil
Cool.
sands production,
I quantify that.
our oil sands producers rank at the top of the world in global assessments of environmental, social, and governance standards.
So, top of the world. What does that mean? Top of the world. It's super vague, right? And this is something that you'll see everyone that's defending the oil field say. We have the best environmental standards. We're the top of the world. Canada's a leader at this, right? But what does it mean? It actually doesn't really mean much of anything. I'll get into it a little after.
Most of these companies have committed to net zero emissions in their operations.
Net zero emissions as a commitment doesn't mean anything until we actually fucking do it. And what he's talking about here is the producers of the pipeline have committed to net zero emissions. That doesn't mean anything. That means fucking absolutely nothing, because guess what? There's still emissions when you pull the oil out of the fucking ground. So it doesn't matter. Like, whether or not the pipeline has zero emissions, guess what? What are you transporting in the pipeline? Oil, which creates emissions, especially Albertan Canadian oil, 3 times the amount. Net zero doesn't mean anything here, right? And of course, they're talking about using like carbon capture technology and stuff. Maybe that's possible. Maybe we'll get to a point where that's possible, but we're going to have to do that first, right? We're not going to have to, like, we can't just talk about like vague what ifs and stuff. We need to actually do that, right? We can't say, well, in like 10 years, then we'll get there, right? So we should build the pipeline now. No.
The government of Canada has more ambitious emissions reduction targets than the new U.S. administration, and our provincial government here is investing billions of dollars in the development of emissions reductions technology to further make progress on this important front.
I'm not sure how true that is. I know that we've invested billions of dollars into the Keystone XL pipeline. I don't know. I don't think we've invested billions of dollars into technology specifically. Could be wrong. Maybe that money is being invested somehow into technology. I fucking highly doubt it, but...
In other words, Canada is part of the solution to the energy transition. But today's decision was made without giving Canada the chance to make that case.
That doesn't actually really matter, because when a country makes decisions, to a degree, if it's not in the US's benefit to make that decision, then why would they make it, right? Like, having a discussion with us, sure, like that's like not the worst idea, but I don't like know really where you're gonna get from that discussion, especially if your mind is like already very much made up, right? The US has like no real need for this pipeline. They've ramped up their own production of oil since so Keystone was initially introduced in 2005. At that point in time, the U.S. had more of a need to meet demand of oil, and so the Keystone made a lot more sense back then. What happened was the Keystone got put on hold so much, like shelved pretty much, right? So much that essentially what ended up happening is that they needed to meet the demand in some way. They can't just keep waiting for Keystone XL to be approved to get them more oil. So they just ramped up their own production and they met their own goals. Similar things have been done in Canada too, to get our oil to market. Essentially, if one pipeline didn't work, we figured out something else that would work. So at the end of the day, the U.S. really does not need Keystone XL anymore. It just doesn't really make much sense. I could pretty much tear apart any argument that you can make, trying to say that like why we should send our oil to the U.S. Like there's a couple good reasons, but like even then, when you look at like the grand scheme of things, it just doesn't actually make much sense. So I'm gonna go through this little comment up here, and then I'll talk about the environmental stuff. I made a nice little write-up, a lot of points that I had like researched and stuff, that you'll be able to find that information for yourself if you want it. It's all out there. Canadian oil and gas is produced at some of the highest environmental, social, and governance standards in the world. So that's the statement that I love to see just over and over and over again. What does that mean when we talk about that? What do we mean when we say the highest environmental, social, and governance standards in the world? So, okay. So the best thing I could find is that supports Canada right off the bat is a study about corruption levels. Now, corruption levels for like oil and its production is a pretty like vague like metric to judge something on, but it's pretty much the case where you're going to make the best argument for Canada. Canada is at a close second place for corruption levels in like the in with for our oil essentially in the study, but we rank behind Norway, so we're not actually first place. We are high up in there, right? So maybe we could say that that might be true, that the highest environmental, social, and governance. So maybe this might be governance standards, right? We could maybe make an argument that like corruption level would mean governance to some degree. But even then, the U.S. is actually like right behind us on this chart. So it doesn't really like when we're talking about the Keystone XL and the U.S. and Canada kind of thing. And we want to make a pipeline into the U.S. Well, if the U.S. is right behind us by this metric, then they're practically equivalent to us. So why would they want to have like the Keystone XL over their own oil? It doesn't really make much sense. Now, environmental impact and regulations. So, like I said before, this point is completely mute. Like the highest environmental, social, and governance standards doesn't fucking matter. And I think that this is actually just a flat out lie. That we have the highest environmental standards, and I will tell you why. So, like I've said before, 1 barrel of oil sands produced oil releases about 3 times as much greenhouse gases when compared to conventional oil, due to the amount of energy necessary to convert the tar sands into synthetic crude. And then, like I said before, we rank 47th out of 50 for carbon footprint measured per barrel. So this doesn't. How does this at all sound like high environmental standards? Right? This is just a reality of what it takes to make our oil usable, right? It doesn't really have much to do with standards, but environmental impact is all about like if you have the best environmental standards in the world, but your product is still like just extremely negative compared to the rest of the world's, then it doesn't really matter how high your environmental standards are, right? Because your consequence of your product is still much more negative, regardless of what you have for environmental standards. It takes anywhere from 2.8 to 28.5 liters of water, and that's like a conservative guesstimate, to make 1 liter of bitumen. So 2.8 to 28.5 liters of water to make 1 liter of bitumen, depending on the extraction method. And this is like Alberta specifically. Then the water that we use to do this becomes contaminated. We have to place it into what's called tailings ponds. Essentially, it's just like dirty, oily water. Have you ever seen those commercials of the birds for like the Dawn dish soap commercials where they're covered in oil, and then they use the Dawn dish soap to like clean off the animal? That's like fucking Alberta. That's what a tailings pond is. It's just a fucking vat of like contaminated oily water. And I don't know, like, do you think that you could ever make an argument that that's environmentally good? Do you, like, what kind of environmental policy allows you to just take this, like, water, make it completely fucking useless in order to have your oil converted into synthetic crude, and then just dump it into a pond that any wildlife can, like, dip their feet into? Do you not think that that's going to have an extremely negative environmental impact? That makes no fucking sense. How at all is that a higher environmental standard? Can someone please tell me? Good luck. It's not going to happen. That's like just a couple layers of this too, right?
Have you read on the new tech where they are talking CO2 from the process of extracting oil and pushing it back into the ground to use less water? It's supposed to stop CO2 from going in the air by putting it in the ground.
I mean, that would be good, I guess, right? Like if it goes into like somewhere other than the air, I would assume that the negative impact we have from CO2 would be from it being in the air, right? So sure, like if they can do that, then awesome. Is that something? Do you know if that's something that they're doing in Alberta, or is that just like a worldwide thing, or what have you heard about that? Do 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 do. Yeah, kind of getting back. I'll reply to Mitch if he whenever he sends a message here. But yeah. So tailings ponds, which is clearly a negative thing. The amount of water it takes to get the oil out. I don't know how to stop it from reading the link. Okay, let's see if I can get into this link here. 1 second. We derail the conversation. OP. Pumping CO2 underground can help fight climate change. Why is it stuck in second gear? Sask Power. Okay, so this is Canadian. There are many uncertainties with respect to global climate change, but there's one thing about which I have no doubts. We will not solve climate change by running out of fossil fuels. Sure. Understanding this leads to 3 possible pathways we can follow to lower greenhouse gas concentrations and explain why I've chosen to focus on my research on carbon capture and storage. We can continue to burn fossil fuels with little to no restrictions. We will blow by atmosphere CO2 concentrations of 450 parts per million. Blah, blah, blah. Dangerous to exceed. Sure, negative. First option, bad. Restrict fossil fuels so that we'll leave most of our coal, oil, and gas in the ground. This is probably not realistic. Find a technology that lets us use our fossil fuel reserves without eliminating CO2 in the atmosphere. Such technology exists today. It's called carbon dioxide capture and storage. To deploy carbon dioxide capture storage on the scale required is a monumental task. We need to store billions of tons of CO2 annually. However, this is the level of effort needed to address climate change. Similar efforts will be needed with other climate mitigation technologies such as renewables, blah, blah, blah. As of now, however, CCS is used very little, nowhere near the scale required to make meaningful dent in emissions. Why? The reasons have less to do with technology maturity and more to do with government policies than the commercial incentives they create. How does CCS work? A CCS system has 3 major components. Capture, where the CO2 is removed by chemical process from power plants and other large industrial facilities. This is good. I think a majority of our so this is probably a good spot to target because a majority of our emissions come from like the big factories and stuff. The captured CO2 is generally compressed into a liquid state. Transport mainly through pipelines. So we require more pipelines. Great. Pipelines are problematic in that like most of Canadian and like American soil is like indigenous soil. So you have to go through indigenous areas, and a lot of them just don't want it there. And rightfully so, because pipelines, even though they may be the most efficient, it doesn't mean they are 100% efficient. That's something that's really, really important that we have to nail down, right? Like, just because something is more efficient does not mean that it is 100% efficient at doing what it does, right? These things are very, very likely to still leak, and when they do, they create, like, monumentous damage, like, demonstrable. Storage into deep geological formations at depths greater than 800 meters. Cool. All the necessary components of a CCS system are in commercial use today, somewhere in the economy. To be considered commercial grade, these different components need to be integrated and scaled up. Gas, oil, coal. So what is it saying here? It's saying that's... What is this? How much carbon is in the ground and how burning it would increase CO2 in the atmosphere. Oh, okay, I got you. That makes sense. The basic process for capturing CO2 from gas streams was invented in 1930s. Fuck, that is old. The first installed on an industrial boiler starting in 1978 in California. In Saskatchewan, Canada, the first commercial scale operation at a power plant, a coal burning plant that generates 110 megawatts and emits more than 1 million tons of CO2 per year, started in October 2014. And its operator says it's exceeding expectations. In the U.S., there are CO2 pipeline networks with more than 4,000 miles of pipe. These pipelines were built primarily to bring CO2 from natural occurring wells to oil fields, in practice known as enhanced oil recovery. CO2 gas is pumped into existing wells to force the release of more oil. About 50 million tons of CO2 per year are transported this way. Interesting. Injection of CO2 and other gases into geological formations has been practiced for many years. As early as 1915, natural gas was stored underground. The first enhanced oil recovery operation injecting CO2 started in 1972. Acid gases have been stored in geological formations since 1989, primarily in Canada. Okay, so it seems like we're using some of it. Investing $1 million a year. The figure has since ballooned to more than $200 million a year. So, a special report on the carbon dioxide capture and storage, confirming CCS's position as a major climate mitigation option. Under the vision was to have 20 large-scale demonstration projects online by 2020, at which time CCS could be considered commercial. In 2009, billions of dollars in stimulus money from the U.S. and Europe were appropriated to help fund the vision. We were on the road to commercialization, but then we had some potholes, lack of markets. I don't know. This doesn't really like describe to me like how. It seems like it's probably a good idea, is what I'm gathering from this. But I don't know, like there could be some other negative consequences to like shoving carbon down into the ground too. I'm not quite sure. Something that it would be interesting to have some studies on and stuff. So funding, yeah, it just seems like the government just.
A random link XD.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Okay.
May not be the best rib.
Yeah, it seems like they're just like talking like very vaguely about it. They don't really talk about like any numbers. Or like why. They're not. Yeah, that's the this whole thing. They don't really talk, like they kind of give you a general idea of how it works and stuff, but they're not talking about like why, I guess, which would be important for like that's what I want to know is like how is this effective, right? Like how much would we need? How many people would need to do it, kind of thing. It does seem interesting though. One second, I'm just gonna let Izzy in because she's meowing. Meow meow meow. Meow. Yeah, it does seem interesting though. I mean, like any kind of technology that we can use to like make things better, I'm 200% behind, right? As long as it actually does make something better and it's not posturing. So, kind of getting back to what I was saying before, it seems like this whole argument that that Alberta is has the highest environmental, social, and governance standards in the world just seems to just not be actually the case. Like I said, we've got so number one, our emissions from the oil are just higher than everyone else. The amount of water that it takes is just exponential, and it becomes wastewater. Not only like is it that we use lots of water, but also that water just becomes fucking useless, right? So we are actively taking water out of the system by doing that. That's huge. That's extremely negative. And then we have tailings ponds, so we're actively destroying the environment by doing it. We're creating something that's like actively just negative to the entire ecosystem. On top of that, deforestation is another issue that we might come into in Alberta, because the majority of our oil reserves are located below boreal forests. So if we want to extract that oil, it's very possible that we might just have to like remove a lot of the forest in those areas, which is clearly just a net negative. Now, as long as they replant the trees, this could be fine, right? Like there's ways to mitigate that one. It's not as bad. But you are still actually, like, it's not as bad when you just think about the trees, right? The fact that you're actually destroying an ecosystem, you could be killing off species, right? Endangering species in the process of this, right? Just removing like natural species. We're not even talking about like if this is like indigenous land and like that's like some of these like wildlife that live in this area might be like fundamental to the existence of like indigenous tribes. Or like reserves and stuff, right? This might be where they get some of their like their food from. Really, really important thing that we need to like note. And while it's true that we have some amount of regulation, it is of no consequence if the overall impact of oil extraction is still unsustainable in the long run. 37% of oil wells sit abandoned in Alberta. Oh yes, but we have the highest environmental, social, and governance standards in the world. But we let 30% of our oil wells sit abandoned in Alberta. So those companies just fucked off after they built them. Or it's also the equivalent of 170. So just 37% of oil wells sit abandoned in Alberta. That's approximately 170,000 oil wells. Only 0.1% of land has been reclaimed in a 50-year period. Yeah, man. Bye-bye. Yeah, only only 0.1% has been reclaimed in a 50-year period in Alberta. There's also like some other estimates that it could be about like 11% has been reclaimed, but those would be uncertified reclamations by the government. So like you can make some arguments that maybe the government's not certifying it for whatever fucking reason and they should be certified or blah blah blah. It doesn't really matter though, because when we're looking at these like actual numbers, if we're only reclaiming at maximum 11% of the land, that's nothing. That's extremely inefficient. What are we talking about? Highest environmental, social, and governance standards in the world. It means nothing. It's just very, very frustrating to me that like we speak a lot of this like just outright lies, I guess, right? Like because we want to defend something. I don't know. It's very, very frustrating. Going into, that's pretty much like my main arguments for like why it's just a lie when we talk about that. But going into the last little bit of this, on top of that, the Keystone XL pipeline will be powered entirely by renewable energy by 2030. Doesn't change the fact that we're pulling oil out of the fucking ground to send it through those pipes, making it a net zero operation. Sure, so maybe the pipeline itself is a net zero operation, but like we're putting more oil to the market, which is actually going to be like a net positive, and actually delivering lower emissions overall when compared to moving the same oil by rail. Sure, when we compare it to moving the same oil by rail, this would be true. It's probably like a positive thing then, right? To some degree, that we would be doing it by pipeline instead of rail. Yeah. That's pretty much it. I don't know. It just seems like there's a lot of fucking lies going on here. And I just figured I'd address it. It's very, very frustrating to me, seeing a lot of Albertans just making, like, arguing these, like, really, really terrible points that, like, aren't actually backed by anything. It's just a lot of, like, feel-goods, pats on the backs kind of things, right? We need to be, like, actually, like, realistic when we're being critical about these things and making decisions, right? And it might help you understand a little bit why the rest of the world isn't exactly in line with something that makes so much sense to us. Cool. And the last thing I wanted to do was just a little, like, catch up on on the situation unfolding in Grimshaw. So just for, like, a little how do I put this? Brief description of what's going on in Grimshaw. Essentially, there was a man with a white KKK hood that he had, like, made himself out of a pillowcase or whatever, and he went to, like, protest anti-mask rule, or, like, mask rules or whatever in Grimshaw by wearing a KKK hood in front of the post office, and it garnered like quite a lot of public attention, especially in Alberta. I think even Canada. It was quite a large debacle, and essentially the initial reaction from the town was kind of like, hey, yeah, like, we don't like that, but, like, we're not racist, guys. And it kind of just sparked this, like, huge discussion where a lot of locals in Peace River and Grimshaw were really offended that that they could be associated with the term, like, racist, essentially, as a town. And what ended up happening was there was actually a group of people that came down from Edmonton and Calgary regions, I think, and maybe even other smaller regions in Alberta, up to Grimshaw to protest the fact that like, nothing really had come from like, actions or actual, like, real good condemnings came from what had happened in Grimshaw. So since then, essentially, this is just an update since the protests had happened. So media released January 26th. This was, like, 2 days ago. On January 7th, an individual, this is from the town of Grimshaw, an individual wearing a white hood was photographed outside of the, a white KKK hood was photographed outside of the Canada Post Office in the town of Grimshaw. Council for the town of Grimshaw stands behind the mayor's comments that our community and its residents in no way condone this individual's actions. So that's good. This is a better, like, condemnation. This matter is in the hands of the RCMP for investigation. We ask that any individuals that have information regarding this incident reach out to the RCMP to make a statement in order to assist with the investigation. So cool, that's good. Like, generally a positive thing. And then they address the protest here. A demonstration was held in our community on January 23rd, 2021. Council acknowledges people's right to peacefully protest. Good. We ask all those who participate to peacefully demonstrate, whether in person or through social media, with civility and respect. Very good. That's true. Council recognizes that our community and province was built and will continue to be built by citizens of diverse backgrounds. Great. We realize that racism exists in all communities, and ours is no exception. Council commits to researching, identifying, and engaging resources to create awareness and understanding for our community to learn more about diversity and inclusion. Amazing. So if this is actually something that they follow through with, then this is, like, a pretty good reaction now. This unfortunate incident has made it clear to Council that the responsibility to condemn racism falls on all of our citizens, including elected officials and community leaders. We strive to continue to do our best as we work through this issue to lead our community where all residents feel welcome and safe regardless of race or protected ground. Great. This is pretty much, like, an overall very, very positive like, statement. The only way that you could maybe take this negatively is that they said they stand behind the mayor's comments. And the mayor's initial comments were kind of like, hey, racism bad, but we're not racist, kind of thing. But I don't think that's, I think what they actually mean by the statement is just that, like, his initial statement about, like, racism bad kind of thing. So that's pretty good. So overall, like, it seems like it's been, like, a pretty positive, like, response from those who have the ability to, like, make influence and stuff in Grimshaw, from the elected, like, representatives. Now, the overall response from Grimshaw and Peace River has still been quite filled with negativity. I've noticed on Facebook specifically a lot of people going really hard against the idea that Grimshaw might be considered racist because of their response, and it's very, very interesting to me. So I have this little video here. I haven't watched this yet, but apparently this lady had come in. What does it say here? This woman pulled in, saw the protest. So this was from the actual protest they had in Grimshaw. This woman pulled in, saw the posters, and hopped on the phone, talking a mile a minute inside the post office, clearly unimpressed. She came out, and I held my BLM sign and said, "Black Lives Matter." That was all it took for her to stop dead in her tracks and challenge our purpose and justify her friend's actions. So then she shows us a different picture of him in a hood and says, "He's always like this. It's not what you think. Anything to protect the racists and uphold their values and white supremacy." I knew this trip was needed, but it really was needed. The amount of angry people was shocking and also not surprising. This is what they mean when anyone says that you're maybe that Grimshaw has racist in it or whatever kind of thing, right? Is that we're defending the people who have done the bad actions. If your initial reaction to seeing somebody wearing a KKK hood or something that even largely resembles a KKK hood is to defend that person and say, well, I don't think they meant it that way. Well, I don't think then you're condoning the action then, right? You're excusing it, right? You can't say that you're not racist and then condone actions, right? The way to be actively anti-racist, right? And so that people can never label you racist is to condemn any actions of racism. I don't know why this is so fucking hard for people to wrap their heads around. I see a couple of my friends on my friend list too that are just absolutely fucking baffled at how you could call Grimshaw racist and stuff. You can't defend somebody who's done something that's racist and then say that you're not racist. You are actively defending their abuse, the way that they act, right? You have to condemn it. If you see somebody doing something racist, right? Something that's very, very arguably racist, then if you want to be perceived as non-racist, and I would assume that's how we want to be because racism is very, very clearly bad. I'm positive no one's going to fucking defend racism here. You have to condemn it. If you see someone doing something racist, you stand with the abuser. If you do nothing, right? You only solidify their power. You have to condemn it. If this is an action, if you believe that Grimshaw and Peace River are truly not racist, then how do you do that? How do you do that? How do you prove that? It would probably be by the actions of Grimshaw in response to it. So if the majority of residents of Grimshaw and Peace River saw this man in the KKK hood, and the majority of them ostracized the fuck out of this person and condemned the fuck out of these actions and said, nope, I don't support that. I don't want that shit in my town. Not welcome here. And rejected the fuck out of it. It's kind of hard to call those towns racist then, right? Because they condemn it, right? That's why Grimshaw is being called racist. That's why Peace River is being called I don't know Peace River is necessarily, but I know a lot of my friends from Peace River condone it too. So or people I know, not friends, I guess, but that's why though. It's very, very simple. You have to condone it. Or I guess you'd have to condemn it to be, condemn it to be clearly against it, right? It's your actions that speak. So this is why people are calling Grimshaw racist, because they're quick to defend this individual. It's very, very, very simple. There's nothing really complex about this. We can, it doesn't really, and there's something important to note here too. Why do we judge the actions of this individual as racist? I'm sure that a lot of people would want to give this person the benefit of the doubt. Maybe you know this person too, right? Fuck, maybe this is your uncle or something. And you don't want, man, my uncle's not racist. Man, that guy's not, I know that guy. He's not right. Small towns, you know everyone, right? You're quick to jump and defend this person, right? But it's not about whether or not they even understand the intentions. Now, I'm going to have a hard time believing this person did not understand, that this person didn't understand what they were doing was racist. How can you not understand in this day and age that the white hood is not racist, right? And cutting it in that way. This was clearly done on purpose. But even if you could give them the benefit of that doubt, we could still make the argument that this action is like overall a negative, like racist action, right? We don't judge actions based on people's intentions. We shouldn't. We really should not judge actions based on somebody's intentions, right? Because harmful actions will always have or can always have positive intentions, right? Like, say for example, like cheating on your significant other, right? Like the intentions might not be necessarily this is probably a really weird example that a lot of people aren't going to get, actually, but I'll finish the analogy just for the sake of it. If you cheat on your significant other, there's probably underlying reasons as to why you did it, that you might not be finding what you want in the relationship and stuff like that. It doesn't excuse the action, right? Even if you can come up with some weird justification for why you've done something, it doesn't mean that the action does not have a negative consequence associated with it, right? You have to judge an action based on the consequences, right? So you decide whether an action is good or bad based on that. And so we go from that. Someone wearing a white hood, whether or not they understand the implications of it, is going to be a net negative consequence, right? To any minorities in the area, to any minorities that see it online and stuff like that, right? And especially when they see people defending it, that person, right? You've created this situation where it's a huge fucking funneling net negative consequence of these people feeling super marginalized and super attacked, right? And and unsafe to walk around the town and stuff anymore, right? So I don't know. I just don't understand. It's it's so fucking simple to get, and I really, really hope that this can get through to somebody who might not have understood that before. So yeah, I'm gonna watch this video now, and we'll see what's going on with this.
Just because he's not in the full robe.
Maybe it's the work jacket. He looks like he has a job. He's a racist with a job.
Well, that's what it usually looks like. I don't know what you're trying to prove here, but that's terrible. That's no better. And you want to wear...
What is he usually wearing?
And we drove by 3 Confederate flags coming into town. Don't tell me that it doesn't have anything to do with race. Just because you know him doesn't mean that he when you put that on your head and you walk into public, you're making a statement. What is this doing to this small town by you guys?
Bringing awareness and protecting the black people that called us to come out here because they're scared to live here.
How do you think that any...
He meant nothing about that, because I know.
Okay,
You don't know, though, and see it from the racialized person's view. If people are lighting crosses and hanging black people and lynching and killing black people, obviously somebody who dresses up with this type of history...
ways that you can prove that you're anti-mask other than wearing a KKK hood on your head.
It's not a KK.
It is.
Tell me the difference.
There's no difference.
Go ahead and tell me the difference. I'd love to know.
I'm just curious too. This is a really interesting argument that he didn't know what it meant, but he was wearing this mask in protest. You can't have it both ways. You can't say, hey, Cruz. You can't have it both ways. You can't say that this guy doesn't understand that he's wearing the mask, but then also defend the way that he's wearing the mask in protest of mask rules, right? Because clearly if he's wearing this KKK mask in protest of mask rules, he knows that it's going to bring attention to his opinion, right? He knows that this that what he's doing is what's the word? It's going to be people are going to have
wearing it with the point on top.
Yeah, exactly, right? It's very, very clearly, right? So you can't make the argument that he's going to be that he's doesn't know what the mask means or whatever kind of thing, but then he was also using it to protest masks, because you would only wear that to protest masks to get a visceral reaction from people, right? Because you know that it means something it's very provocative, right? So there's no fucking way. We can easily use inductive reasoning to determine that he clearly knows what it means. But even then, even if he didn't know what it meant, it doesn't matter, because we judge actions based on consequences, not on the individual's intentions. It has nothing. I don't care what his intentions are at all. I don't care to defend it at all, right? And defending that, in fact, just normalizes it, right? It's just a net negative reaction.
You can't say, if
Yeah, so this is like pretty much more of the same, exactly what I was saying before. It's pretty much just like somebody defending someone that they probably know, like I'm sure that that's like I know that that is like difficult, and like I want to like talk about that like a little bit. It doesn't excuse this action still, but like I know it's definitely going to be hard for people to like get over their own like biases and stuff of like people they know. Maybe this person's her friend or her relative or whatever kind of thing, right? And seeing somebody that you know do something that's like really negative, and then seeing the fucking world like come at them for it, it's probably going to be pretty hard. How could you like condemn that person, right? But the thing is that like if we don't condemn negative actions, then we're not trying to make positive changes then, right? If you see someone doing something that is like negative, and you can understand that it's negative, then you should tell them, right? You should, like, how do you expect them to change otherwise, right? When you defend people who do bad things, then you're allowing those bad things to happen. You're saying that you're fine with those bad things, you're fine with those bad consequences. So yeah, that's pretty much like my main points, I guess, with that one. I don't know. I hope that that I can convince people of at least like to understand why this is bad, right? Like we understand like that it's the consequences, right? That we can determine whether or not something is like racist or negative, essentially. And yeah, if Grimshaw can come to terms with that and can call it out and say we don't want that in our town and boot it the fuck out, right? Then it's really hard to label Grimshaw as racist. But as long as a lot of people are publicly defending it, that's why Grimshaw is being called racist, right? And it's really hard to like argue against that point. It really is. You can't just say, oh, well, not everyone's racist, right? Like clearly not everybody is racist, right? But there's a vocal amount of people that are supporting the negative behavior, and that's the downside. So yeah, I think I've covered pretty much like all of the topics that I want to talk about now.
It's really showing who people from our town really are. It's unfortunate.
Yeah, absolutely, right? I know like growing up in Peace River and like in the Grimshaw area too, there's like lots of great people there for sure. It's one of those things where I just feel like it doesn't really need to be said, like it's there's good people everywhere, like when you see somebody doing a bad thing in your community, if your immediate reaction is like, well, that's not me kind of thing, right? Like, well, like clearly, right? There's lots of great people, right? It really sucks to see, and especially when you're from somewhere, to see like the name being like dragged in like a little bit of a negative light. I can feel that for sure. And especially when you're from that area or whatever, seeing people come out of the woodworks and defend it and stuff, that's pretty fucking like difficult. If this was like especially in Peace River too, like I might like have to, I don't really know these people, right? So me personally, I don't like that lady in the video, I don't really recognize, and then I don't know these people really personally anyways. I don't think I know the guy who was wearing the hood. His identity's been kept pretty secret. But fuck, man, like if that was like somebody I know, then like, that would be, I would have to like get over some amount of like bias and stuff, right? To be able to call it out. And I know like a lot of people aren't able to do that. And so like knowing that I actually even have friends that like defend this action is really, really unfortunate, but it is what it is, I guess, right? Hopefully just I can do a good job and everyone else too. I see like you out there, Cruz and stuff, like trying to convince people about things, right? Like that's pretty much like the best thing we can do is just really try and convince people like why it's bad and kind of go from there. But yeah. Yeah, so I think I covered like pretty much all the topics.
She was someone very close, and it's hard to see her trying to defend it.
Oh yeah, exactly, right? So like yeah, it's unfortunate, right? Like fuck, man, like
it's really difficult to not call them out.
Right? Yeah, like absolutely, right? Cuz like especially if you're like somebody that like that is close with that person, right, or might consider close to that person, then like things can get really, really heated really quickly, right? Like people take things really personally and stuff. It's really, really difficult. Like how do you go about having that conversation with people, right? For me, it might actually be like a lot easier for me to just come out and be like, hey, like don't do that kind of thing, because I have like no idea who these people are really, right? Like at least I don't know them personally. So but yeah, for anyone like local in the town, it becomes this like really weird situation where you're like a lot of people in small towns, they like everyone knows each other, right? So like when you see, yeah, like it's just like you can become this huge hive mind thing where everyone kind of groups together and everyone wants to defend each other because like you're kind of defending like the town, right? It's like a big family, so it's pretty rough. But I mean, you know, when you know that something's wrong, and you know that person that's doing the wrong thing, it's still really hard. So I don't know. I can empathize with it for sure. It's very fucking difficult. But yeah, I'm gonna pretty much wrap up the stream now. I've pretty much gotten all the topics covered that I want to, at least in the time frame that I wanted to. I got a couple more things. I found this video about the Great Reset, which is a big fucking cringe conspiracy. And I don't think I really have much time to go over it today, so I'll probably schedule that for like another stream in the future. But yeah, thanks for popping in, anyone who has. Hope you enjoyed. And I'll be up whenever the fuck I am next time. I might have some free time next week to pop in again and stream again. Thanks for popping by, and have a good one.